Good evening and welcome to another special edition of Tracking the Tropics. I'm meteorologist Wes Hohenstein in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hurricane Delta is once again a major hurricane tonight, and landfall is about 24 hours away. It's expected to hit just miles away from where Hurricane Laura came ashore just 42 days ago. Hurricane warnings are up now for parts of Texas and Louisiana. As you can see, everyone from emergency management to everyday citizens are helping their hometown get ready for the heavy rain, wind, and storm surge that Delta is expected to bring to the area. Tonight, we're going to break down everything you need to know about the storm, and we'll go live to South Louisiana and talk to our friends in Baton Rouge and Lafayette as they get ready for yet another tropical system. But first, here's the very latest from the National Hurricane Center. The last major update we got was at 5 o'clock Eastern. Just a couple minutes ago, we got the intermediate update from the National Hurricane Center, and there weren't that many changes. Before I show you that, let's just start out with the eye test. And no pun intended today, but the big story today by looking at the satellite view is we were actually able to see the eye. And when we can see the eye of the hurricane, which is now about 30 miles wide, and when we can step back and say, hey, you know what, that looks like a tropical system. I open up a textbook, look up a hurricane. If that's what it looks like, you know that the storm is very powerful and likely strengthening anymore. And we're getting some indications that that could be happening again tonight. So here's the very latest on the 8 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Winds have held like they went up to at 5 o'clock at 115 miles per hour, gusting to 140. So no changes there. There is a change in the pressure. The pressure has come down a little. And usually when we see the pressure go down, an advisory so or two later is when the wind speeds go up. So pressure usually goes down first, then wind speeds come up. So pressure's down a little bit. And it's also started to make that move because as you see the yellow line here, that's the historical track. If I'm in Southeast Texas and I haven't been watching any updates on this system and I see this huge Category 3 hurricane just barreling this way and I don't know that it's expected to turn, I would be very concerned. But remember, all along the forecast was going to have that turn. That turn has started tonight. Now it's moving north-northwest instead of northwest. And obviously it's got to do that because remember, landfall is expected somewhere around southwest Louisiana. The Hurricane Hunter aircraft, for the last several days, there has been at least one or two out there, and they're literally crisscrossing paths tonight. Two of them out there, one leaving from the Air Force Base in San Antonio because their normal base in Mississippi they had to evacuate because that's one of the places that could have been impacted. The other was in just outside of Tampa. So they've kind of met in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico as they continue to gather very valuable information. It was one of these planes that actually picked up on the 115 mile per hour winds at 5 o'clock that brought this storm back up to Category 3 status. If you remember, it was a Cat 4 in the Caribbean. Then it smashed into the Yucatan Peninsula, came back down to Cat 1. Tonight it's back up to a Cat 3. And I know it's getting dark out there, so the visible satellite, we can't see it at night. Visible satellite is great because it's just like taking your camera or your phone up into space and taking a picture. You can do it when the sunlight's out, but there's so much more detail, and we can see these enhanced cloud tops around what we are seeing for the first time today, the eye of that hurricane. It's a beautiful, it's a pretty shot there. We could look at this for a long time and be really impressed, but we've got to remember underneath that storm is where it's going to be very dangerous. And unfortunately, there could be more strengthening. Here's the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. Expected overnight to increase as strong as 125 mile per hour winds, remaining a Category 3 as it again makes that north turn and then maybe a northeasterly turn headed for southwest Louisiana as a Cat 3 sometime Friday afternoon or Friday night, about 24 hours from now. Then, as they all do, they turn off to the northeast and they weaken once they make landfall. Still a Cat 1 Saturday in the early morning hours over central Louisiana, then weakening, dissipating, but still spreading rain over the Tennessee Valley and parts of the East Coast. Here's a little close-up view. We'll go hour by hour. Friday at 6 p.m., again, about 22, 23 hours from now, we expect it to make landfall. Cameron, Louisiana. Most of us had never heard that name before Laura hit a month and a half ago. That's where Cat 4 Laura hit, and now literally just a few miles away, could have a Cat 3 sometime Friday night right around dinner time. Then again, weakening over the Alexandria area, central Louisiana, sometime in the overnight hours, and then again racing off toward the Tennessee Valley. So hurricane warnings have already been hoisted for most of the Louisiana coastline. Outside of the red that you see, we have tropical storm force warnings. Remember, the warnings mean hurricane or tropical storm force conditions are expected in the area highlighted. Some of those areas highlighted: Lafayette, Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We're going to go there live starting right now to find out how things are going. Let's start in the capital of Louisiana. Tonight, Jesse Gunkel in Baton Rouge. He's been on with us several times already this season. Jesse, I think I said, I hope I don't get to talk to you again this season. Unfortunately, I may have jinxed it because here we are. Talk to me about what's going on in Baton Rouge tonight. You guys look to be out of the worst, but I'm sure that doesn't mean you guys are just sitting back waiting on this one.
Yeah, again, we're not relaxing because we still have the potential for some impacts here in the capital area. And obviously, again, when we last talked, it was because of Laura making landfall. Well, once Delta makes landfall tomorrow, would you believe it? That's going to be the 4th time the state of Louisiana just this year has had a named storm make landfall. It all started out early in the season with Cristobal, which was just around the mouth of the Mississippi, right over New Orleans, and then drifted over the capital area. That's actually where we sit. And then we had Marco, which kind of at one point was coming like it was right on top of us. That's when Laura and Marco were going to crisscross a little bit, but floated just along our coastline, but made landfall just near the mouth of the Mississippi River. And then we moved on to Laura, and you see that kind of ran right through Cameron Parish. We continue to talk about that because you see here's the difference, roughly only about 20 miles landfall. Now, there still is that potential that it could move a little bit further east. I think the difference here, at least for the Baton Rouge area, it looks like this one's going to be a more broad storm, which means the winds are going to extend much further from the center, which means we have a better chance here in Baton Rouge, especially if those steering winds and a little bit of wind shear to help kind of drive this system more towards the northeast, kind of leveling this system out. And I think there is the potential at least to have some hurricane force winds here, and I think that's going to cause some power outages, maybe sporadic at this point, but we've been dealing obviously with so many storms. Sally came very close, also a pretty decent system that drove up towards our coastline, and we've been kind of under the gun since early this year. It all started out with Hannah, and then we moved on to Beta, and as you see here, Sally, Marco, and it continues to come down. In fact, there's a new wave just coming off the coast of Africa. It's got about a 20% chance of development. Now, the key with that one is it's got a long way to go, and right now it looks like it's going to run into some upper level shear along the way, and that's going to most likely shear it apart. But this season has been extremely active for us, and again, we've got to keep an eye on the big picture here, that we're going to watch these storms, and at least for us, we're kind of getting to the thick of things. And again, you can look at our traffic cameras, and what I want to point out is that we've got that evacuation traffic currently underway across the Mississippi River. It's backed up for quite a few miles, and it's taken people a very long time to get out of some of those coastal parishes. And this is the reason why, because of those widespread power outages. Obviously, I don't think rain's going to be one of the biggest impacts here, but you can see those hurricane force winds. And again, we're talking winds greater than 74 miles per hour and pretty sustained for multiple hours. And that's where you start to see those tree limbs start to topple, trees start to fall, you get a little rain in the mix, and guess what? You start to call for those widespread power outages. Obviously, for most of the capital area, what we call Baton Rouge area, even New Orleans now kind of falling in that 39 to 73. So it's going to be a little bit more sporadic out there. But again, we're talking pretty decent winds for at least a 6 to 8, maybe even 12-hour time span. And as you can see, our power outage index, and it's pretty significant for a lot of locations as to where we could be seeing those spotty power outages out there. So I think that's going to be key, because this is really going to be, luckily for us, unlike Laura, as it made its way through, it was a nighttime storm. This is going to start out as a daytime storm, but it's going to eventually migrate into an evening storm as we move forward. So again, really a lot to watch with this system because again, there's the potential impacts of rain, obviously, a little bit closer to the center of the system. We're also going to watch the impacts of isolated tornadoes, and that was a big factor during Laura. We had multiple tornadoes kind of spawn back to back to back. In fact, I believe we had at one point somewhere we ended up with, I think, about 20 tornado warnings that popped up throughout the afternoon and evening before Laura made its entrance into the state of Louisiana. So I think we're going to start up with that, or at least ramp up to those tornado warnings early on tomorrow, and then it's build up as we make our way into the evening hours. That's when we get back to those high winds, and hopefully we don't see hurricane force winds here because obviously that could cause some widespread damage across the area.
Yeah, Jesse, you guys are under a severe weather risk, so that's yet another thing we have to worry about. I want to throw meteorology aside for a second because you mentioned Interstate 10, how packed that was. Kind of explain to everybody what I-10 means to the whole country because you got huge cities on each side, and you guys are kind of far enough on the outskirts that you might be an evacuation destination, right?
Yeah, and again, you see here, you're looking at a lot of these parishes along the coast that are going to hit very hard. St. Mary Parish, anybody really along Vermilion Bay here, Iberville Parish, you're even talking Acadiana Parish and Lafayette Parish and Vermilion Parish and Cameron Parish. Well, again, there's a lot of water out there. I don't know if people know the area very well, but a lot of marsh, what we call bayous. And again, a lot of these cities are surrounded by water. So when you start talking about a storm surge at a 7 to 11 feet, that's very alarming. That's very significant. So what happens is a lot of these people, and in between, you're talking Lafayette is here. This is where we are. This entire basin is basically water. So what happens is, again, that water can get pushed pretty far inland. And the concern is, again, you got to get to one of these interstates. So we have I-10, which runs either to the Houston area. So if you're in the Lake Charles area, you're probably heading west. But if you live somewhere around Acadiana, you either go up I-49, get out of the area as far north as you can. But again, with the current track, Alexandria is going to get hit by this system, possibly Monroe, even portions of Shreveport, even portions of Mississippi. We're talking Jackson, and obviously even us. We're still kind of on the outskirts, so a lot of these people are probably heading at least further eastbound towards New Orleans or maybe North Shore or potentially even into Mississippi and further down the road. So again, they're trying to get to that safe place as quickly as possible, but right now the roads are jam-packed and it currently is a parking lot out there on our interstate.
Yeah, I-10 is the equivalent of, let's say, I-70 in the Midwest, I-95 on the East Coast. It's busy on a normal Tuesday afternoon, let alone when people are trying to evacuate. You said people are headed to New Orleans. Do people evacuate to New Orleans? That is traditionally a place you want to get away from anytime a hurricane's coming because of how low they are?
Yeah, in all honesty, again, the levee system helps out. That's the key here in the New Orleans area. So again, when you're not anticipating too much in the way of storm surge or even rainfall, I think New Orleans is now calling for about 2 inches of rain. So again, that's not substantial at all. So again, they can obviously handle that. The pumps do work, which is great. I think the best bet is to even move further east and get well outside of the cone and really well outside of the impact. So I would, if I were smart, I would even head maybe about 200 miles away before I finally start to breathe with a sigh of relief.
Yeah, Jesse, I'll get you out of here on this. You know, Laura was, like I said, 42 days ago. I can't believe that. Can you compare what you guys had with Laura and what you're expecting with Delta? I mean, Delta might be a little weaker, barely. How different are these two storms going to be from your perspective?
Yeah, perspective-wise, I think, again, that's key, because a lot of people are asking, is this going to be another Laura? Well, I don't believe so, but there still is the potential that we could see some very strong winds. And the reason I say that, Laura ramped up and became a Category 4 just before moving inland. This is actually going to be weakening as it approaches our coastline. Now, again, the wind field, I think, is going to be a little bit larger, and this one's actually going to inch, I think, closer to us, and that's why I think we might see more in the way of impacts, obviously, with this system. Again, for us, again, it's all about the power outages. It's going to inch very close, and yes, Laura was also a slow mover. This is not going to be a slow mover. Laura dumped a bunch of rainfall for us. This one, well, Delta, I think, is going to move quick enough that it's going to be in and out of here that we may only see about maybe 3 to 6 inches of rain, and we can definitely handle that.
All right, good stuff. Jesse, I'll say good luck to you and everyone down there in South Louisiana, and I won't say I hope I won't talk to you again, because we know what kind of season we're living through.
Yeah, don't jinx us again. We've got a lot of season left.
Yeah, indeed. That's Jesse Gunkel down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as they get ready for Hurricane Delta. All right, so let's talk about one of the things he mentioned, and then we're going to get to down the road in Lafayette, Louisiana, weakening before it makes landfall. The storm is a monster now, almost 500 miles across, a Category 3 that, as I pointed out, could strengthen a little more. Here's one of the things we're looking at very closely. All those storms that Jesse mentioned that have already been in the Gulf this year, that have already hit Louisiana, well, they have dug down deep into the ocean, pulled up some cooler water. Cooler water is deadly to a hurricane, but unfortunately, it's still got some really warm water underneath it. What I have here is a picture of the Gulf of Mexico with the sea surface temperatures on it, and you can see every temperature above 80 degrees is important for a hurricane because that's the magic number, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, that a hurricane needs to grow and to stay alive, to strengthen. So we've got South Texas. We've got the central and southern Gulf of Mexico, which is just like bathwater, 80 to 85 degrees. All of this contributing, along with weak upper-level winds, to the strengthening of this system. Unfortunately, the cool water is only around the immediate coastline, and it's not a lot cooler. It's not like you would want a wetsuit. It's below 80 degrees. It's 78 off the coast of Houston. It's off the coast of southeast Louisiana, 77 degrees. I saw a reading of 75 from another buoy. So those cooler temperatures will help. The question is, by the time the storm gets to those cooler waters, is that really going to be enough to slow down this freight train of a hurricane from smashing into Louisiana? It might weaken it a little. But that's one thing we've been looking at very closely. You also have to remind yourself that intensity forecasting throughout the history of hurricanes has not been that great. The hurricane hunters, the men and women at the National Hurricane Center, all the forecasters who you've watched over the years forecast these storms, we can do a pretty good job of forecasting where it's going to go. The trouble is how strong it's going to be when it gets there has always been problematic. So that's why we have to prepare for a 3, but also maybe a 4, hopefully a 2. All of that is in play as this storm heads for the coast of Louisiana. Let's talk about some of the worst of the winds because we mentioned the landfall might be 24 hours away, but I want to show you what's going to be happening Friday morning at 10 a.m. Everything you see here in yellow, this is the wind forecast. Those are those 39-mile-per-hour tropical storm force winds. That's the magic number because at 39 miles per hour, that's when power starts to go out and trees start to come down. So those will reach Galveston and the coast of Louisiana Friday morning at 10 a.m. Then through lunchtime, you can see the winds spread to that I-10 corridor, to Lake Charles, to Lafayette. This is when they start. Throughout the afternoon, here we are Friday at 4. Those strong winds continue. In fact, they really start to ramp up in the middle of the afternoon Friday. Then the hurricane force winds, which you see here in red, 74 miles per hour and higher, arrive around dinner time along the coast. Then they move into the highly populated areas along I-10 where Laura hit just a month and a half ago, Friday night. So some places start to get strong winds Friday morning at 10. Here we are Friday night at 10. So 12 hours of battering of winds. Things don't calm down for our friends along the coast of Louisiana until early Saturday morning. So it is going to be a long, drawn-out affair. And one of the people who unfortunately are going to be in the path of that, our next guest. Let's go back down to Louisiana. I want to bring in Heath Morton. He's the chief meteorologist at KLFY in Lafayette, Louisiana. Heath, we've talked to you a few times like we did Jesse. You guys are more under the gun with this storm. Talk to me about what's been going on in Lafayette today as you guys get ready for yet another major hurricane strike.
Been pretty quiet today, just a few showers, Wes. You know, the wind not a big factor yet. Of course, like you said, that's going to start picking up a lot more tomorrow. Then tomorrow night, we expect the brunt of everything to roll in here, mostly tomorrow evening and to probably about midnight. Early Saturday mornings is what we're expecting. The worst of it is probably about 5 p.m. Tomorrow afternoon until midnight early Saturday. Damaging winds 50 to 100 miles per hour. A few tornadoes possible. It's what we're expecting. Significant storm surge 4 to 12 feet. It's going to be very similar to Rita, we think. Rita and even Laura, maybe a little worse than Laura, because it's coming a little closer to us. 4 to 8 inches of rain. The rain, not the biggest threat. Of course, we're going to see some flash flooding with that, but that's a lower end total with a hurricane because it's going to be moving so fast. So we can take 4 to 8 inches of rain. That's about how much we saw with the Laura. So isolated flash flooding. So here's what it looks like with the wind gust: 75 Lafayette, 76 Opelousas. That's at 11 o'clock tomorrow night. It has the center right over Jennings. You can see winds down to 13 there as the eye goes over. And then things start looking a little bit better as we get through tomorrow night into Sunday, Saturday into Sunday. Storm surge forecast. This is the biggest threat, this plus the wind. Of course, with Rita, we had this problem. Ike, which hit Galveston, had as much storm surge as Rita did, and Rita was closer and a stronger storm. But the problem is the winds with Ike were spread out really far. They had a huge wind field, and we learned a lot from that because of the storm surge was pretty enormous across Vermilion Parish and Acadia Parish and Iberia Parish. So it doesn't necessarily mean, how strong the storm is. You have to look at that wind field inside, and we expect this wind field inside of Delta to really get larger as we head through tonight and tomorrow. So we're looking here at that storm surge forecast. This could go as far north as LA 14. A lot of folks down there, evacuations, mandatory evacuations, because with Rita and Ike, it went north of LA 14, so those areas will probably be underwater. And we're looking at this goes all the way back. Not as bad in the Lake Charles area as it was with Laura, but still that storm surge is going to come up in the southern parts of Calcasieu Parish. So that's what we're expecting right now. Like you said, Wes, it really depends on how much stronger does it get tonight, because we do expect the waters to cool Delta down. The cooler waters will at least weaken it some as we head through tomorrow night. But the problem is, how strong is it before it gets there, and how much will those cooler waters weaken it? We do have a little more wind shear in the atmosphere as well across the northern parts of the Gulf, so that could help out as well. But we don't need it to get much stronger, because the stronger it gets, of course, the stronger it's going to be at landfall, because we don't expect it to weaken down to weak Category 1. We're hoping it weakens it to 2, but more than likely it could be 2, 3.
Right, and then you're only talking 10 miles per hour difference. I mentioned, Heath, that it's been only a month and a half since Laura devastated your area. I've got to imagine there are still people who haven't got everything cleaned up or haven't had the trash hauled away from the Laura devastation. Is that the case?
It's true, yeah. I mean, there's still rubble around. We have, you still see, limbs down, trees that were blown over. So we're not completely done cleaning up from Laura. And, the devastation even farther west is worse over toward Lake Charles. And then you have this one coming in, which is probably going to blow more stuff around. You have to think about stuff that's been blown over already that hasn't been cleaned up. That stuff's going to be flying around with Delta coming in with those winds. So unfortunately, it's a sad situation that this thing's going to hit very close to where Laura did just a little over a month and a half ago. Hopefully this is it, though. We hope that we're getting into mid-October. We hope we're about done with hurricane season here. It's been a rough one across Louisiana. As far as I can remember, 8 named storms in the Gulf just this year. I've been here 13 years, and that's definitely a record that I can recall. And it's just incredible, the Gulf this year. Atlantic, not as bad. Most of it, the action's been in the Gulf of Mexico, and Louisiana's been kind of in the crosshairs.
Yeah, Isaias was our biggest threat on the East Coast, and I know you guys have had so much more. One of the things that everyone saw a picture of from Lake Charles after Laura was the National Weather Service radar dome getting knocked down.
Right.
Can you tell us anything about what's going on with that? How are you guys going to get good, reliable radar data? I'm guessing in 42 days they haven't rebuilt it, right?
Right, yeah. So we have our radar up and running, so we have ours here. And the next nearest one is Fort Polk, which is a good 60, 70 miles away. Then you have Slidell, but that's 120 miles away. So ours is up and running, so we do have that. So that helps out a lot. That's right here in the backyard. But yeah, it's been tough without that NexRad data out of Lake Charles since it's been down. We've had several weather events. Of course, we had Beta a few weeks ago that caused a lot of heavy rain. So luckily we got ours up and going again, and it seems to be working fine. So we hope that'll help us out too with Delta coming in.
Yeah, let's hope so. Heath, I'll get you out of here on this one. I'm kind of curious if you can share with everyone watching tonight what everyone in town is doing to get ready. Is everyone leaving? And then I'm kind of curious what your plan is for covering this on TV. Take us a little behind the scenes about what the next 24 hours are going to be like.
I have seen, I've heard that the traffic really bad going north up toward Opelousas along 49. People are evacuating, especially the coastal areas, low-lying areas of Vermilion Parish, Iberia Parish, some evacuations there. So those guys had to get out. And I've seen folks boarding up windows, businesses, homes. So people are taking it very seriously. Actually, I've seen a little more preparation than I did with Laura, and I think that's because people are still a little PTSD from Laura, and plus this one's coming a little bit closer to us. What we're going to do, we start live coverage tomorrow at noon, wall to wall, and we'll go on probably at least until midnight tomorrow night. We're going to go on until it's up into the central parts of the state and we don't have any major threats here. So we'll probably be on at least 12 straight hours. With Laura, we were on 26 straight hours. So this one, we're thinking 12. It's going to be moving fast, so we're not expecting to stay on as long, but we'll start tomorrow at noon. And we'll have 2 Mets in here at a time, meteorologists in here at a time. And then there will be one to come in to fill the gap, so we'll make sure that we're fully staffed. We're going to have crews all over the area, news reporters, news anchors, and it's going to be something that we're going to keep people really informed and hope everybody tunes in. You can catch us on KLFY.com, or our Facebook page will be streaming live there as well. Of course, here in town, KLFY News 10.
Heath, I wish you and everyone down there the best of luck. I know this is getting old, but hang in there. We thank you for spending some time with us tonight on Tracking the Tropics. Everyone, that's Heath Morton down at KLFY in Lafayette, Louisiana. We'll talk to you next time, Heath. As a result of the anticipated storm surge, crews in Grand Isle have been working around the clock to build a 1,300-foot levee on the back side of the island. This is down in Louisiana. Grand Island has been getting battered throughout this season, but residents and emergency crews in that area are resilient. I want to take you now to New Orleans. WGNO TV, one of their reporters, Jacob Bradford, gives us a look at how the island is preparing for yet another storm.
Grand Isle is one of those coastal communities that at the first sign of a hurricane getting into the Gulf, they take action to get prepared for it. Behind me is the Burrito Levee, and on top of that, as you can see, a large line of sandbags that the Louisiana National Guard was out here putting up earlier. And on the other side of that levee, that's the Gulf of Mexico. Take a look at this video. This is what the Louisiana National Guard was out here doing earlier, was putting up those sandbags, reinforcing it, because over the years, that levee has been battered by hurricanes, and that's why it needs just a little extra help keeping the water off the island. Now, storm surge is their biggest concern out here. We spoke to Jefferson Parish President Cynthia Lee Shang, and she says that already they are experiencing flooding on the island from Hurricane Delta.
We've been having flooding from what we call the backside or the bay side, and there's some emergency contracts in place. They'll be working all night trying to build a levee to protect the residents on the island. They've been, we were just there earlier. We were expecting more trucks, and they're gonna plan all night to do the best they can to start building what we call an earthen levee. So here they're moving sandbags and we're moving dirt on the other side.
Now, right now, Grand Isle is under a voluntary evacuation, but that changes tomorrow morning at 6 when it becomes mandatory. Reporting in Grand Isle, Jacob Bradford, WGNO News.
All right, Jacob, good stuff. Before we say goodnight tonight, I want to leave you with this. Last night we talked about how important computer models are and how we as meteorologists use them. Unfortunately, we don't get to pick our favorite line of the computer model or pick which model run we like. We've got to use all that information to make our best forecast. Well, this round with Hurricane Delta, the computer model forecasts have been amazingly in sync. It's kind of like growing up, you had an older brother or a younger sister. You guys didn't agree a lot, did you? The computer models are sometimes like that, but weren't your mom and dad always really happy when brother and sister did agree or could sit next to each other at dinner and not get in a fight? The computer models are doing that this time around. Last night I showed you the American model versus the European model, which just in the naming and the rivalry they built up lend themselves to disagree. But for the last 48 hours plus, maybe going back even farther than that, these two models have been in sync and in really good agreement about when and where Hurricane Delta is going to hit Louisiana. This is the model run from earlier today for Friday night at 8 p.m. These are isobars, and remember, where the bullseye is where the center of the isobar is going to be, where the lowest pressure is going to be. Isobars connect pressure, so when we get a bullseye, that's where the lowest pressure is going to be. Yellow is the European model, the bullseye right there, pretty much in between Lake Charles and Cameron, Louisiana, at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. The red is the American model, just a few miles south of that. Now, in the big scheme of things, that's probably about 20 to 30 miles difference. But for a whole globe that is thousands and thousands of miles wide and long, that's a pretty small number to make up. A lot of good agreement telling us that there's a lot of certainty that our friends in Southwest Louisiana are going to have a tough go of it. And this just adds to the list. Jesse and Heath mentioned this. But look at all the storms that have been in the Gulf of Mexico this year. Named storms, so tropical storm or hurricane. There have been 7 of them so far, and we'll just go counterclockwise from Hannah in South Texas to Beta in the central coast of Texas, and then kind of crawled along, bringing a bunch of rain through Houston and Louisiana. Laura, we know, 42 days ago as a Cat 4, Cameron, Louisiana. Cristobal, there's Marco, that wasn't much, but it gave some rain to southeast Louisiana. And then our friends along the Gulf Coast, the Florida Panhandle, had Sally to deal with. Well, let me put in the 7th storm that's going to impact the Gulf Coast this year, the 4th storm to hit Louisiana. That is Delta in red. Look how close it is to the landfall of where Laura was. Not as strong technically, but it's going to be equally as devastating, a back-to-back blow for southwest Louisiana. And Delta continues our record season, 25 named storms down so far. And Jesse mentioned we've got another wave coming off the coast of Africa. Down the road, it's a long shot, but next up on the Greek alphabet name list is Epsilon. I hope, as I'm sure you do, that we don't go there, but there's still a month and a half left in the season. And we want to thank you for spending part of your night, part of your hurricane season with us here on Tracking the Tropics. As we all know, Hurricane Delta is not done. Landfall about 24 hours away, so we are back with another special edition Friday night, same time, same place on Tracking the Tropics. That's your Thursday edition. We thank you for being here. For Jesse and Heath in Louisiana, everyone behind the scenes helping to make this happen, and for you, thanks for watching. I'm Wes Hohenstein, live in Raleigh, North Carolina.